the Middle Ages, a time of shadows, of stone and parchment, of firelit halls echoing with whispers, a period often misremembered, misunderstood, distorted by centuries of myth and imagination. You've heard it before. People in the Dark Ages believed the earth was flat, that the sky was held up by angels, that the world was smaller, simpler, and ignorant. But what if I told you that was never true? From the very beginning, the truth was different. Scholars, explorers, monks, and philosophers knew more than history books would later allow us to believe. They observed, calculated, debated, they mapped stars, measured shadows, and understood the curves of the horizon long before the Renaissance. Yet, the myth persists. Imagine walking through the cobblestone streets of a medieval town at dusk. Fog clings to the walls of stone towers, torches flicker, casting moving shadows on the faces of men and women who study, teach, and question. Outside, the wind carries the distant roar of the ocean. Ships sail to unknown lands, guided by the knowledge of a world not flat, but vast, spherical, and waiting to be understood. This story is one of misconceptions, of stories that took hold because fear loves the familiar, and mystery seduces the human mind. But it is also a story of the real Middle Ages, a world of curiosity, science, and brilliance hidden beneath the layers of myth. The origin of the flat earth myth, the idea that medieval people thought the earth was flat, began centuries after the Middle Ages. In the 19th century, writers and historians crafted this narrative, creating a sharp contrast between the supposed ignorance of the past and the enlightenment of the modern age. Books, paintings, and even lectures propagated the notion. It was an effective story, darkness giving way to light, ignorance yielding to knowledge, but it was false. Medieval scholars, particularly those in monasteries and universities, were aware of the earth's roundness. They studied classical texts, works by Aristotle, Ptolemy, and others, which described the earth as a sphere. Sailors noticed the curve of the horizon. Travelers observed that different stars appeared in the sky as they moved north or south. The evidence was in plain sight. Yet, centuries later, the flat earth myth persisted. It grew, nourished by the very fascination that myths inspire. The astronomers and the observers consider the work of medieval astronomers. Figures like Al-Hasan in the Islamic world, or Thomas Aquinas and Roger Bacon in Europe, explored optics, astronomy, and geography. They wrote treatises, measured shadows, and made calculations that demonstrated a spherical earth. These men were often cloistered, working in dimly lit rooms filled with manuscripts and candlelight. Yet, their understanding was profound. They combined observation with reasoning, questioning, and imagination. Maps from the period, the Mappa Mundi, though decorative and symbolic, often indicated a world known to be round. Scholars debated latitude and longitude, and the horizon was never a boundary but a gateway to discovery. The church and knowledge, many believe that the church suppressed the knowledge, keeping humanity in ignorance. The reality is more nuanced. Yes, there were conflicts. Heretics and dangerous ideas were sometimes silenced, but the church also preserved knowledge. Monasteries copied classical texts, storing centuries of wisdom in silent libraries. Cathedrals, universities, and scriptoria were centers of learning, not merely superstition. Clerics calculated the movement of the stars, predicted eclipses, and guided sailors safely across the seas. They knew the earth was round because it was part of the intellectual tradition passed down from antiquity. Exploration and evidence. Consider the explorers who dared to leave the safety of familiar shores. Leif Erikson reached the coasts of North America centuries before Columbus, navigating by stars and the sun. Mariners noted that ships disappeared hull first over the horizon. Travelers described different constellations in distant lands. This was practical knowledge, not theory. The roundness of the earth was not a mystical concept, but a navigational reality. Without understanding the globe, these journeys would have been impossible. The misinterpretation of maps. One of the most enduring images of medieval ignorance is the map, the Mappa Mundi. These maps were not designed as precise navigational tools. They were symbolic, artistic, and theological. Jerusalem at the center, biblical events scattered across continents, creatures lurking in unexplored territories. To modern eyes, they seem ignorant, but to medieval minds, they were rich with meaning. combining observation with spiritual and cultural understanding. A mapa mundi does not indicate a flat earth. It indicates a worldview where faith and knowledge coexist, a story told in cartographic form, the power of myth. So why do we continue to believe in the flat earth myths? Because myths are seductive. They simplify the past, creating heroes and villains, darkness and light. They tell a story that comforts our modern sensibilities. We are enlightened. They were not. But history is never that simple. The truth is stranger, richer, and more fascinating. The Middle Ages were not dark. They were a time of subtle light, hidden knowledge, and relentless curiosity. The scholars who calculated, wrote, and observed did not see themselves as keepers of truth, but seekers of understanding. And yet, their story was almost lost beneath centuries of distorted narratives. Imagine the candlelit halls of a medieval university. Students pore over manuscripts, copying diagrams of stars and spheres. Outside, the wind shakes the ivy on the castle walls. Somewhere, a traveler sketches the horizon from a cliff overlooking the sea. They knew more than we often give them credit for. They understood the vastness of the world, the curvature of the earth, the complexity of the skies, and yet our imagination prefers darkness, prefers to see them as ignorant, fearful, and flat-minded. The true horror, perhaps, is not that people in the Middle Ages believed the earth was flat. The true horror is how easily we allow myths to replace reality. If this journey into the shadows of history left you questioning what you thought you knew, stay with us. Subscribe to Omen Myths. Explore the forgotten truths. Question what you think you know, because the past is not always what it seems, and the shadows often hide the brightest light.